The Kingdom of Mutapa controlled more gold than any state in the medieval world. Not through luck, not through discovery. Through 2 centuries of deliberate military conquest, sophisticated political organization, and iron-working technology that made their warriors almost impossible to defeat in the field. At their peak, the Mutapa rulers controlled trade routes stretching from the interior of southern Africa all the way to the Indian Ocean coast. Arab merchants from the Swahili coast described their kingdom with awe. Portuguese explorers who arrived in the 15th century immediately understood that this was something they had not encountered before. And European historians buried their story so completely that most people alive today cannot find the Kingdom of Mutapa on a map. This documentary tells the story they buried. The Iron Warriors who built the most powerful empire in southern African history, who traded with China and Arabia and India while Europe was still arguing about which king owned which muddy field, who fell not to a superior civilization, but to a European empire that simply had guns. The Kingdom of Mutapa, a name that deserves to be as famous as Rome. The Kingdom of Mutapa. You first need to understand the Zimbabwe Plateau, because this landscape did not just support a civilization, it created one. The plateau sits more than 1,000 meters above sea level. The altitude gives it a mild climate, reliable rainfall, and rich agricultural soil that the surrounding lowlands cannot match. It also sits directly above one of the richest gold-bearing geological formations in the world. The Shona people who inhabited the plateau had been mining and smelting iron and gold for centuries before the Mutapa kingdom was formally established. Their iron technology was not primitive. It was sophisticated metallurgy that produced weapons and tools of quality that impressed every outsider who encountered them. And their gold. The gold that would eventually draw the entire outside world to their door. The Kingdom of Mutapa was founded by a warrior named Nyatsimba Mutota. He began his campaign of conquest around 1430 CE. He was the ruler of a small Shona chiefdom in the territory around Great Zimbabwe. He had watched the ancient stone city decline. He had seen its trade networks weaken, and he made a decision that would change southern African history forever. He would not stay in the old center. He would expand north into the Zambezi Valley, into the territory where the salt deposits and the elephant ivory and the new trade routes were waiting. He launched a military campaign that in scale and ambition had no precedent in the region. His warriors were armed with iron weapons of exceptional quality. They fought in organized formations. They sustained campaigns over hundreds of miles of difficult terrain. Tribe after tribe in the Zambezi Valley submitted or was defeated. The territory under Mutota's control expanded with each campaign season. He gave himself a title that would define the dynasty he was founding. Mwenemutapa, the master pillager, the lord of the plundered lands. The political system that the Mutapa dynasty created was more sophisticated than European observers who arrived later were prepared to understand. At the top was the Mwenemutapa, the paramount ruler whose title meant Lord of the Conquered Lands. His authority was considered sacred and his person almost divine. He did not eat in public. He did not drink in public. When he coughed, the entire court coughed with him, so that no one could identify the moment of his physical vulnerability. Below him sat a network of provincial governors, military commanders, and territorial chiefs, all bound to the center through tribute, marriage alliance, and the threat of military force. The military was the foundation of everything. Without it, the tribute network could not be maintained, the trade routes could not be protected, and the provincial governors could not be kept in line. The iron warriors of the Mutapa kingdom were feared across the entire southern African interior. Their reputation preceded them by months. The Kingdom of Mutapa did not just mine gold. It controlled the entire gold trade of southern Africa. Miners dug shafts deep into the granite bedrock, following gold veins that the Portuguese would later estimate had been worked for centuries. The gold was smelted, refined, and worked into bars, wire, and objects of remarkable craftsmanship. It was then carried east to the Swahili coast trading ports by organized merchant caravans operating under royal protection. At the coast, Arab and Swahili merchants were waiting with goods that had come from Arabia, India, Persia, and even China. Chinese porcelain from the Song and Ming dynasties has been found in the ruins of Great Zimbabwe. This was not isolated Africa. This was a kingdom connected to the world. The Kingdom of Mutapa sat at the center of a trade network that spanned the entire Indian Ocean world. The military that enforced this trading empire was built around one material advantage that few of their neighbors could match: iron. The Shona ironworkers produced weapons of such quality that they were themselves trade goods, exported across the region in exchange for cattle and other valuables. A warrior armed with Shona iron-faced opponents carrying weapons of inferior metal or no metal at all. The Mutapa armies organized their campaigns with systematic thoroughness. They did not raid, they conquered and administered. Their commanders understood terrain, supply, and the psychology of intimidation in ways that made them effective against both organized resistance and guerrilla opposition. For 2 centuries, no power in the southern African interior could challenge them in the field. In 1498, a Portuguese fleet sailed around the southern tip of Africa and into the Indian Ocean. Everything changed. The Portuguese were not explorers in any innocent sense. They were a maritime military power, specifically looking for the source of the gold that had been flowing into the Mediterranean from Africa for centuries. When they reached the Swahili coast, they found an answer almost immediately. Local merchants told them about a great kingdom in the interior that controlled all the gold. The Portuguese called this kingdom Monomotapa, and they immediately began planning how to control it. The first Portuguese to reach the Mutapa kingdom were not soldiers. They were missionaries and traders. What they found surprised them. A sophisticated court with established diplomatic protocols. A ruler who received foreign visitors according to procedures that had been practiced for generations. They found traders who had been dealing with Arabia, India, and China for centuries, and who were not easily impressed by what Portugal could offer. The Mwenemutapa allowed the Portuguese to establish trading posts on his terms, not on theirs. For several decades, this worked. The Portuguese accepted Mutapa authority and paid tribute. The kingdom maintained its independence. Then greed destroyed the balance.
Don't seem to...
By the mid-16th century, the Portuguese presence in Mutapa territory had grown from a small trading concession into something far more ambitious and far more dangerous. They had built fortified trading posts called feiras along the main river routes into the interior. They had begun to involve themselves in Mutapa succession disputes, backing the claimant who would give them the best commercial terms. And they had firearms, the single technological advantage that would eventually prove decisive. In 1571, Portugal launched a direct military expedition into Mutapa territory. Francisco Barreto led a force of over 1,000 Portuguese soldiers and allied African warriors up the Zambezi River. The campaign was a military disaster for Portugal. The interior defeated them more effectively than any army. Disease killed more Portuguese soldiers than the Mutapa warriors did. The expedition retreated without achieving its objectives. Portugal failed in direct military confrontation, so they changed their strategy. Instead of conquering Mutapa by force, they would do it from within, by making individual Mutapa rulers dependent on Portuguese military support for their own succession. When a disputed succession threatened a Mutapa ruler's position, the Portuguese would offer soldiers. In exchange, they would demand gold mining rights, trading monopolies, and territorial concessions. The Mwenemutapa became increasingly dependent on the Portuguese to maintain his own authority. The empire that had dominated the region for 2 centuries was being slowly hollowed out from within. By the early 17th century, the Mutapa kingdom still existed on paper, but it no longer controlled its own economy or its own military alliances. The Mutapa dynasty did not simply collapse, it was pushed. And when it finally fell, it was not the Portuguese who delivered the final blow. In the 1680s, a Shona military leader named Changamire Dombo launched a rebellion that would reshape the entire political map of the region. He was the leader of the Rosvi state, a Shona polity that had been building military strength in the southwestern plateau. Changamire Dombo launched a series of campaigns that drove the Portuguese entirely out of the interior plateau. He destroyed the Portuguese trading posts. He killed their garrisons. He ended Portuguese military power on the plateau definitively and permanently. The Portuguese fled to the Zambezi Valley lowlands and never returned to the plateau in force. But the Mutapa kingdom did not recover from what had been done to it. By the 18th century, the Mutapa kingdom had been reduced to a small rump state in the Zambezi Valley, a shadow of the empire that Nyatsimba Mutota had built. The last Mwenemutapa was deposed by the Portuguese in 1902, making the dynasty one of the longest surviving royal houses in African history. But here is what the history books miss. The Mutapa kingdom did not simply disappear. Its cultural and political legacy shaped the region for generations after the political structure was gone. The ruins of Great Zimbabwe stand today as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They are the largest stone ruins in sub-Saharan Africa, south of the Sahara. When colonial Rhodesia was founded in the 19th century, the new rulers claimed that the ruins must have been built by Arabs or Phoenicians. They could not accept that an African civilization had built something this sophisticated. They were wrong. Every piece of archaeological evidence confirms that Great Zimbabwe was built by the ancestors of the Shona people, by the same civilization that became the Kingdom of Mutapa. Zimbabwe took its name from these ruins when it became independent in 1980. The nation named itself after the greatest achievement of the civilization that preceded it. The Kingdom of Mutapa controlled more gold than medieval Europe could imagine. It traded with China when Europe thought China was a legend. It built stone cities that its colonial-era critics said Africans could not have built. They built an empire. They defended it. And when they fell to the most powerful colonial military machine the world had ever seen, not to a superior civilization. This was the Kingdom of Mutapa, and it deserves to be remembered.